Well, welcome back to the Morning Report and day three of the Great American Rebuild. We've talked about trust, we've talked about the family, and today we dig into our next battleground, faith, or maybe more accurately, the absence of it in the public square. Today's title pretty much says it all, Taking Back the Pulpit. Because if we're going to rebuild America, we have got to put faith back into its rightful place, front and center in the fight for freedom. All right, let's tell the truth right off the top. Far too many churches in America are functionally useless in the fight for truth. They're not teaching truth. They're teaching niceness. They're not calling out evil. They're avoiding controversy. They're not preparing the saints for the spiritual battle. What they're trying to do is, some of them, trying to boost their Instagram engagement. Now, I get it. I get it. The idea that a lot of churches have is that they need to grow. And it isn't just for the money. It is not. It's because the more people who are churched, the hope is that the more people who are there to be helped. The church is right now in the mode of, I really want to help. It really wants to help people get through the daily struggles of life. I've personally said for a long time, if I go to church on Sunday and there's nothing I can use on Monday, then what did I spend Sunday doing? If I can't use something that I learned, a concept, something that I learned on Sunday, and I can't implement it on Monday and Tuesday and the rest of the week until I get back for more teaching, then what am I doing? And there is the disconnect. There's a disconnect because teaching the gospel in the correct way and unabashedly, and tying the teachings of Jesus to the thing that people are seeing around them, and not be afraid of calling out some stuff, like we've already talked about, like the dissolution, the attack on the family. Trust. Because faith is trust. Trust is faith. It's the same thing. Exactly the same thing. So what's not happening is that some of the key areas that need to be addressed on Sunday morning from the pulpit, and as they relate to life in the world on Monday morning, are not being addressed. And I am really of the heart and mind, it isn't because that a lot of churches don't want to, a lot of pastors don't want to. They're kind of afraid to. And there's all sorts of reasons, including the 503c, all this other stuff. And what you don't want to do, and it makes sense, you don't want to intentionally turn people off when your thought pattern is to bring people in. So, why you invite somebody into your building and then immediately insult them? Now, inform them, teach them in love. If they happen to get offended, then so be it. But the idea is that what you're not going to do is what doesn't really work anymore is intentionally insult people, because it's not very Christian-like. not in the world that we're living in today. So there are lots of balances and nuance and all of this, but people aren't being prepared. The saints aren't being prepared for the spiritual battle that we're in, because it's not being called a spiritual battle, because it definitely is. It's not a blue versus red battle. It's not a Democrat versus Republican battle. It's not a liberal versus conservative battle. It is not. It's a spiritual battle. It's a good v evil battle, which is the battle that is as long as time immemorial. This is the missing piece, in my not so humble opinion. So, yes, they're trying to boost Instagram engagement, because if then people know about it, then maybe people will come. Yes, we did have pastors afraid to open churches during COVID. Why? Well, not far from where we're sitting here, with a pastor that I know was arrested for having church. The pastor at the river here in Tampa, Rodney Howard-Browne, was arrested, was picked up by the sheriff's department of Hillsborough County for having church. Yes, while the liquor stores, the casinos, the strip clubs were open. My church never missed a meeting. Now, frankly, it's a lot smaller church and not so much in the public view. So this is why this church, the River, is a very large church, very much in the public view, and they wanted to make an example of them. And nobody wants to be made an example of. Pastors don't necessarily want to go to jail. They don't. Now, you can call it cowardice if you want, but who wants to get locked up? Nobody wants to get locked up. Because the balance there is that you have to tell people to obey authority, at the same time telling them which authority to obey and which authority to deny. And for a lot of people, it's a very slippery slope. It's hard. It's tough. I think that people of faith are built for it. And we saw that in a lot of churches and a lot of smaller churches, we're built for it. Yes. A lot of the churches were closed during COVID. A lot of churches were open, and they met the whole time. Whether you walked in there with a mask or not, some churches were open. A lot of churches were open. So what I'm not going to do at this point, really, in the rest of this series, I'm not going to dog out the churches that made that decision. I'm not. But it is something to consider, isn't it? One of the things that we've been force taught, probably in the past 30 or 40 years, is that your faith is your business. It's a private matter. You should keep it to yourself. So let's not pretend that faith is a private matter, because frankly, it never has been. It's faith that led the abolitionist movement. It wasn't laws. It wasn't anything that somebody now would call a reason to act. It wasn't some call to action. It was faith. It was faith in a Christian God and a Christian Jesus. It wasn't faith in Allah or Muhammad. It was not. It was faith in a Christian God, Jehovah, and a Christian and Jesus. That's what led the abolitionist movement. Faith also guided the civil rights era. what a lot, a great number of the people who were involved in the civil rights era met where? Where did they meet? Where did they organize? Who organized them? Who put stuff together? Pastors in churches across the South and across the North as well. Real faith, not the hashtag kind where you just throw up a hashtag, free, freedom, hashtag freedom. We did our part. Post. No, people who put stuff on the line. Faith. Faith drove the pilgrims, not slavery. Faith drove the pilgrims across the Atlantic. But now we've got some of these people that are calling themselves pastors. And I'm going to continue to say it that way, who are calling themselves pastors, especially in social media, who are saying that Jesus would support gender transitions and open borders. That's insanely ridiculous. That's not gospel. That's theology sold to the highest political bidder. That's what that is.
Well, what do you think the government does? What do you think capital punishment is designed to do? It is designed, and I'm glad that you brought up the race factor. Capital punishment is designed for those who don't have the legal resources, which in a lot of cases have been people of color. It is designed to be used against them, right? So, a government big enough to give you everything you want is also big enough to take away everything you have, your rights, your liberties, and your freedom. So that's why we're seeing the shift towards conservative. They already have an inherent distrust of government. And over the years, that distrust of government has become escalated. And because of distrust of government, because of the innocence factor, because many Republicans and conservatives are starting to see the correlation between being pro-life and being anti-death penalty.
But Willie, what about separation of church and state? What about it? The founders never intended to separate church from influence. Did you hear what I said? Did you hear what I said? The founders never intended to separate church from influence, only church from government control. It's not freedom. It's not freedom of it's not freedom from religion. It's not freedom. It's freedom of religion. Jefferson's wall of separation was never about silencing the church. It was about protecting it from the state. It was never, ever about silencing the church. About protecting the church from the state. The truth? Church should be the most dangerous institution in the country to tyrants and tyrannical ideologies. So if your church is woke, spineless, or silent, part of the problem, which makes you part of the problem. So he was on his way to get a needle in his arm, or however they do it, and they found out that no, that they were wrong. So what gets me, even from a moral standpoint, what gets me is how many people do you think the state has murdered erroneously?
Yeah, these are so again, we have 200 death row exonerees, which tells me that's 200 times we almost got it wrong. We don't have an exact number of how many times we did get it wrong. So now the question is, well, what number are you comfortable with? To me, one innocent person put to death is one person too many. Okay. But for someone else whose threshold may be a little higher than that, I just asked the question, well, what number are you comfortable with? Or
Now here's the hard part. The church that preaches a feel good fluff or feel good message, because some days you need to leave church feeling better than when you came in. And when people say this kind of stuff, yeah, I always have to go, well, what's it in the context of? We can't go in there every week and just whip the congregation and have them feeling like dogs and less than, because that's not what the word says. The word says that we are above and not beneath, that we're the head, not the tail. So, and if you do that, families can start building on the solid moral ground, because schools indoctrinate. It's a fact. Government, just look at it at every level, local, state, and federal, grows. When churches don't give families and individuals a strong moral ground to build on, the culture will collapse. And meanwhile, there are some churches that are still arguing over smoke machines and skinny jeans. Stop it. The stuff that the so-called people of faith are arguing about, especially online, whether the worship service should have a smoke machine, whether there should be a guitar solo in this song. I mean, I spent more than 10 years leading worship at my church. Yes, play saxophone. I know, saxophone, devil's instrument. Play bass, play drums, sang. You can probably tell I sang by my melodious voice here on this podcast. Sang. And we didn't sing hymns. People in our church thought that a hymn was a male person. But there's so much arguing about what worship is, what the music is, how the music is presented. There is such a misunderstanding of biblical praise and worship. You know, when I see churches who go, we have a contemporary worship and we have a traditional worship. There isn't any such thing. Now I'm interjecting this into this, into this podcast, because I think people need to know there's no such thing as contemporary and traditional. Now, you may go to a church where the traditional only has the organ and the choir, and the contemporary has the band. Do you know what the band used to be 75 years ago? The organ and the choir. That was the band. Because those instruments, that was contemporary. That was the instruments you had at the time. And now you have the instruments that we have available to us now to praise God with. We have the saxophone and the trombone and the electric guitar and the bass and the drums and the stuff and the smoke machine and the videos and the lights and the LED boards, all of it. We have it all. And they get into these back and forth petty arguments about, are they having a concert or not? Let me tell you, my experience with this, because this is extremely important to me. When I first got saved, and actually before I got saved, I was talking to my wife. She took me to this church, and her and my son, who was a little kid at the time, had been attending. And I said to her, you know, I could do without the concert at the beginning, because I thought it was a concert too. I really liked the pastor. He was relatable. He formed the gospel into parables, which are stories, just like Christ did. Come on now, that I could use on Monday. But it wasn't until I personally turned my life over to Christ that it all started to make sense. Frankly, it was the music that drew me. It's the lyrics, it was everything about the music. Music is very powerful. And I learned as a praise and worship leader, it's the music that sets the tone. Now, I'm interjecting this, and a lot of you are going to, be rolling your eyes, and that's fine. Roll your eyes until they fall out of your head. But what I'm saying is true. The music sets the atmosphere for pastor to come in and share the gospel. You got to fix the room. People have to escape from the stuff they came in with, and now they have to be in this place to accept. And there's all sorts of ways to do it. Now, an 86 verse rendition of Onward Christian Soldiers, I don't know if that's the way to do it. I know that's not the way that I thought would work. Or singing all 12 verses of Amazing Grace, which is a great song, by the way. That's not the way that we were going to change the atmosphere. And in traditional biblical praise and worship, they lit incense and had smoke. They had a lot of repeating choruses or verses, chants. It's like a lot of songs now repeat something over and over again and over and over again, because if you repeat it and say it over and over again, it'll get inside you. And I know that I'm going on a long time on this, but it's something that's just near to my heart. Now, also, church is not a TED Talk, but teaching has to happen. In order for me to be able to use something on Monday that I learned on Sunday, you've got to teach it to me. So many, my wife is from a more rural area of Florida, and a lot of those rural churches, especially the Black churches, have preaching and not teaching. So a lot of those folks, they have a lot of, they can get up in the spirit. They know a lot of Bible verses, but they don't have a lot of wisdom. So there is that balance between, yes, I need to set the atmosphere, and I need to teach the word in a sense and teach the gospel, present it in a way that people can understand it. Nothing wrong with that. And when you do it properly, it becomes a weapon of war. And we are in a war for the soul of this nation. Now, if we want to rebuild, here's what needs to happen. Pastors preach the whole counsel of God, all of it. Sin, judgment, grace, and redemption. Believers, stop outsourcing your convictions to your pastor. Stop blaming your pastor. Stop depending on your pastor for everything. Know the Bible yourself. Read it yourself. Don't just go there Sunday hoping to, like a baby bird, feeding at the beak of your pastor. Come with something. Know your rights. Here's a hard one. Churches, reject the 5013C. If it silences you, if you are more worried about that than anything else, then the best thing to do is release it. It's for the American church. It would be the best thing ever. Because it's a leash. It's a benefit that has strings attached to it. Cut those strings. Because if it's between truth and tax, truth. Christian parents, mom, dad, raise lions, not woke sheep. Raise lions. The founding fathers risked everything for freedom because they believed in something greater than the king. That someone hasn't changed, has not changed. And he's still calling his people to stand because when all else, stand. All right. Tomorrow, we're going to tackle work. Real work. Because the system needs you to be lazy. They'd rather you binge Netflix, get a check. So whenever I hear about, oh, we need to get a stimulus check, no. And just stay out of the way. Just watch TV, watch Netflix and chill. The check's going to be in the mail in a couple of weeks. You'll be fine. Just stay out of their way. But that's not how America was built. And that's not how we're going to rebuild it. I'll see you then. In the meantime, please share this episode, speak truth boldly, and support independent voices. Because this pulpit ain't backing down.